Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. This is our first in what we hope will be a long series of professional learning and development webinars. This evening, we're very, very pleased to welcome Jody Campo, the CADENZA's Community Project Manager. She'll be giving us a little demonstration of the CADENZA Practice app, which has been developed for use in music instruction and music learning, and we're very excited to learn more about that. And we'll also be joined by two teachers, Heather and Tracy, who will talk about their experiences using the CADENZA app.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the invite to come here. We have a wonderful partnership of many organizations, but one of them being the Coalition for Music Education. And it's been a partnership that's been going on for quite a while. So I'm really happy to be here and to celebrate the collaboration or the collaborative essence of this work. The CADENZA Practice app was created by teachers for teachers, and I think that's why we're gaining momentum, and it's really taking off, especially with our new reality of online teaching. It's not specifically for online teaching, but it absolutely has made it much easier to communicate with students during online lessons, and then transitioning to face-to-face lessons with the idea that we may have to transition back to online. So it's been a nice foundation for teachers and their students to put together and build a communication tool that works from both ends. So I'm just going to share my screen and go through just a few quick little slides to keep me on track. So here we go. So the main feature, or the most exciting part of CADENZA, is that it bridges the gap between lessons. So when I started seeking out a tool to use with my students, I'm a piano teacher. I've been I've had private students for the last 25 years, and I've also taught in the classroom as an itinerant arts music teacher who was brought in from the community. I helped teachers support the music curriculum for 15 years actually. So I knew that when I sent students home with their work, with their practice, the idea of what practice was kind of vague, and students weren't sure what they were supposed to do. Parents weren't sure what they were supposed to do. They knew they were supposed to tell their students to practice, but the parents don't always know what that means. And students don't always know what it means. So CADENZA was created to bridge that 7-day gap between lessons so that students understand what they're supposed to do with their time and how to use it effectively. So as we go through tonight, I'm just going to do this quick little introduction. I'm going to do a demonstration from what the teacher view looks like and what the student view looks like. And then I'm going to introduce my special guests that came to join us today. I'm so thankful. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So as I said, my name is Jody Campo, and my two guests this evening are Heather and Tracy. So I'd like to welcome them. And I've had my piano studio for 25 years, and the classroom teaching, and a really successful summer camp actually that went on until this year. This was supposed to be our 20th anniversary, and it got canceled, but we may finish up next year. All right, so what is CADENZA? Well, number one, it is a digital assignment book for teachers. Number two, it's a logbook for students and parents if needed. And number three, it's an app that's based on research that builds motivation in students. One really key feature, I think, for all of us here, with the exception of Heather, is that it's Canadian. So it's developed out of Queen's University with partnerships with Concordia and the Curious Piano Teachers, who are a group out of the UK, and of course, the Coalition for Music Education. The principal investigator of that research is joining us this evening, Dr. Rena Upadis, and I thank her so much for the opportunity to be brought in as a teacher advisor early in the project and be involved in its development. It's a paperless option for communicating with students. As we know right now, passing out papers, washing hands in between, collecting papers, washing hands in between, has become a real barrier for trying to communicate musical resources with our students. So this is a paperless option to at least take part of it out of the difficulty. So it provides a quicker and improved method of lesson planning. Sometimes when I present cadenza, I get asked, won't it take a lot more time? Initially to set up, I would say it takes a lot more time, but it takes me a lot less time in the long run. When I plan a lesson, I'm meeting the student where they're at. I can look into the student's profile and see what's been accomplished during the week, what struggles they may have had. I may have even been able to help them solve a struggle halfway through the week. And so that's actually quickened my lesson planning time, and it's quickened the success that the students are experiencing as well. It's also very effective for online learning or face-to-face, so it has that choice there. What makes cadenza work is the three-step process that helps the students with self-regulation. So they build self-regulation while they do this. And the first step to that is planning. So the students learn to manage their time, and they also have an active part in planning the practice week. So if they know that they have after-school activities that week, they can help the teacher decide how many targets they should try and achieve, how many tasks are acceptable. So the student becomes active in that planning. Step 2 is the doing part, so actually getting to the practice. So when students log into their cadenza, they click on their latest lesson, they click on the task that they want to start first, and then they click on Start Practicing. The timer will begin, you'll see in the demonstration, a timer will begin to actually time that particular task. The student can reference the description and the checklist that they've built with their teacher during the lesson. And then they get to reflect on their progress, and then they click End Practice. This little step down here, this little sticky note that says the bubbles fill in, this is highly motivating for students because it shows that they checked it off. They did the task, they completed it, and every time they complete a different task and a different target date, those bubbles fill in until they reach the end, and then a little star shows up. Some of them are so motivated they go beyond the little star.
Jody, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Jody, are you trying to share screen right now?
Yes.
It's not running.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just to touch base because it sounded like you were...
No problem. I'm sorry. I will go back to Zoom and share that. I did click it, but it obviously didn't take.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go back there. Okay. So this was our planning stage here. And then this is our doing stage here. So here's where I was mentioning that the students log in and they click Start Practice, the timer goes automatically. And it's great that it goes automatically because then they're not distracted by the technology. We want instrument first, practice first, motivation first, all in a tie. And the tech part of it to be second and in the background. All right, so as I was saying here, we have the little bubbles that fill in and the timer running, and they also have the option of the media annotator, which I'll demonstrate to you. This is a video that can be uploaded and then commented on in real time, so they can make appropriate comments and their teacher can make appropriate comments. The teacher is also able to upload that. The third step to developing great self-regulation is reflecting. So this makes us stand out as a really valuable tool. The students can actually click on emojis per task, so per practice session. They say, actually that didn't go so great and I don't feel great about that. Tomorrow my next step is going to be to improve measures 25 to 28, something like that. The student can also ask their teacher a question, so they can type into the comment box. They click Notify Teacher. The teacher gets a notification that lets them know a student has asked a question or wants them to look at it. I use this for theory assignments. So my students upload completed theory worksheets into Cadenza, and then they click Notify Teacher so I know that they've completed it, and I can go and have it corrected before our next lesson so it doesn't take up lesson time. And students can annotate on personal videos or they can annotate on a teacher video. And that's the end of that. So everyone can see me again, that unshared correctly? Okay, good. A little glitch there. So I thought I would share the student view here to show you. Let's see if I can get it right this time. To show you what it looks like when a student fills in their practice session. And this student that I'm going to bring up, you can actually access if Victoria or Sharon would like to put into the chat room. You can put practicing Peter, that's practicing with an S, practicingpeter@gmail.com. If you've already made a Cadenza account, you can log into your Cadenza account and add this student, and then I will be able to communicate with you right now in real time if we get that connected. So this is what it looks like for the student when they come in. They have their list of tasks along the left, and if you have a family where the maybe the internet isn't so great or the student is really highly distracted by technology, they can export the task as a PDF and do a printed copy. So that's an option that we've just added. So a student would click Start Practice, and this is going to load up here in a moment. Might take a little extra time because of being on Zoom and the bandwidth. So it's going to get going here, and you'll see the timer pop up and automatically start. So there it goes. And it's going to time the student. So now the student has turned their focus back to their instrument and whatever the activity is, and they carry on with normal practicing. If the student finishes before 1 minute, it won't record the time. But of course, that's a way, as a teacher, I motivate the kids to say, well, you know, maybe you should be practicing that task more than 1 minute. So it's a bit of a motivator there to stay in there a little longer. And they can then comment. Maybe it wasn't the best day, but they're hoping for better tomorrow. They can put a little comment here and say, I stopped at measure 9 because I was confused. Something like that. If they click Notify Teacher, then the teacher is going to see the message on the other side. They might also choose to upload a video into the media annotator. I can't actually do that live while I'm on Zoom. But what it does is they tap on it and then it gives them the option right there. They can take a video, upload a video that they've already recorded. They can take the video live right then by doing this. It's my house. And you'll see over on the left in the tasks, they'll get their little bubble filled in, which I was mentioning is so motivating. The kids, any age. I have kids right now from 17 and younger using this, using the tool to support their practice time. Okay. As I said, it's running a little slow just because, there it goes. So here's the filled in bubble. All right, there's the emoji. You can see that the student has left a comment, and you can see that the student notified the teacher. If the student wanted to put in their correct time, let's say they forgot to click Start Practice, which happens, they can do any editing they need to do right here. So it's got lots of options. There's also this reflection area where they can take some time to do some, maybe reflecting on all of their practicing as a whole, or being a musician, or whatever, and they can share that with the teacher as well. So that is what the student view looks like. I'm going to stop sharing that and pop over here to show the teacher view, and then I'm going to ask Heather and Tracy to share on their experiences. So here's my list of actual students. This always excites me. All of these students just practiced less than an hour ago at the top. I'm always kind of amazed. I look and I go, oh, I'm so proud of all of you. It's a great thing to see. They're all active, you know, they're in there, they're doing their thing. So I can click on a list of lessons for a family if I want to kind of go back and take a summary and say, oh, this is how many lessons they've done. There we go. And then I can actually see a summary of the amount of time that that student has done in the week. I can also see where they put their time. So I drop down here, I can see, oh, okay, so this student spent only 8 minutes. Well, she just had her lesson yesterday. So 8 minutes on this, 7 minutes on this, 6 minutes on this. So I get a really accurate breakdown. And I know Tracy is using this really effectively in the classroom, which she'll share with us, to plan the upcoming lesson. So she looks and see, okay, I can pretty much guess where my students are going to be at when they come in for class today. Okay, and one last thing, I would like to show you the media annotator in action. So this is me playing for a student who is having trouble. And I might stop it right there and say, can you make it to here with even rhythm? And I save it and it keeps playing. Okay, so that goes on and you can see the little blue tick here. That goes to the student immediately. I don't have to do anything extra. It goes to the student and the student plays it back and they see my comment pop up from there and back here. So it pops up right on the screen, right there. They can reply to it. And then that happens in the reverse as well. The students can upload videos and have the teacher comment on them, or they can comment on themselves, which is, you know, that's a win-win when the student goes and they can actually show that themselves. Okay, so the final thing I would like to show you is the group feature. So back here, might be able to get there quickest from here. Up here, I can go to my list of group lessons. And this is very effective for the classroom, obviously. So I can go to a lesson that I created here. I find it really effective to share things like ear training. So if I know that all of the kids are at a certain level naming intervals, I can make a video of those intervals and share it with those specific students. So I can make a video, upload it here, assign students. I can actually select all of my students and I can decide if the students will receive a notification up in here. Here's where the notifications happen. And this will be the notification from the example I just showed you. Oh, and actually 2 of my other students have notified me in the meantime since this started. And there's a chunk of theory finished, and this student probably has a question about her sonatina, which I will go and answer later. While I have this screen share up, are there any questions specifically about the teacher view? Okay. Well, I would really love to introduce to you Heather Smith, who is the representative for the RCM in the US, and she's coming to us today from Utah, and she's going to share her experience with CADENZA over the last few months.
Thank you so much, Jody. It's such a pleasure to be here today with all of you. I love this program. I've been looking for a program like this for for a long time. I've been teaching piano for over 20 years. And when COVID hit and I couldn't meet with the students in person anymore, I knew that I had to do something to let the students know what they needed to be practicing, and that's when I found your program. So what's great about Cadenza is that it's a communication tool, not only a way for me to communicate with the students, but also a way for the students to communicate with me. So when I'm sharing with the students what they need to be working on throughout the week, they are also able to communicate with me like what you've said, what they've practiced throughout the week, any comments or concerns they've had, as well as their successes. I've had quite a few of my little students that are ages 8 and below that are on a regular basis sending me notifications on the things that they're doing great. And so it's a wonderful way to help a student, to support them and encourage them outside of their lesson time. So that's what I love so much about Cadenza.
Thank you so much, Heather. That's amazing. Love to hear these stories. And now I'd like to introduce you to Tracy, who also has some really great feedback about how she's been using the tool in the classroom and her private studio.
So I think, like with a lot of people, when lockdown hit, we were kind of all a little bit panicked a bit of how we're going to continue keeping the communication going. I've always encouraged my students to communicate with me through the week if they're having trouble, but not a lot of kids would have email or access to email, and anything I want to tell the kids during the week would have to go to an email. And sometimes parents are good about passing it on, and sometimes life is just, busy and it doesn't. So when the pandemic hit and I started using Cadenza, it gave students a way to access me directly between lessons if they were having trouble or if they just wanted to let me know how things were going. I didn't make it mandatory at first. I just invited people to use it if they wanted, and it went so well that when we were getting ready to go back into the classroom, because I'm a classroom teacher as well, I said, we need to find a way to reduce the amount of paper sharing that's going on in the class. Normally, I would ask students, they would have a practice chart if they're doing their recorder or guitar, ukulele, whatever instrument we're doing at the time, to write down their practice throughout the week. And, each kid would come up and bring me their chart. I record their practice, and it takes time out of the class if you have 16 practice charts to keep track of. And I'm touching all of their material, and it's hand sanitizer, this and that, and it just was not going to work. So Cadenza was going really well with the private students who were using it, and so I said to my principal, I said, look, let's do this for our students, and he's like, was all for that. It's great because, like I said, it gives me more time to teach the kids during class. So I'm not taking 15 or 10 minutes to check practice charts. It gives the kids motivation to practice. Children who weren't filling out practice charts before or practicing before, all of a sudden practicing 3 or 4 times a week. It's a lot easier for them to remember. I don't have to touch their materials. That is such a big one when you have 16 or 20 kids in a class, and every time you touch something you have to hand sanitize your hands, and it's a little bit daunting sometimes for that. And also, if we have to go back to online teaching for my class, for my group classroom students, I want to have a way to be able to keep them engaged during another lockdown. It was hit and miss a bit, but I think for a lot of people it was hit and miss when we went into lockdown at first, trying to find what works to keep kids engaged, particularly with music, because maybe the family is really, trying to concentrate on getting their math and their spelling or their math and language arts in, and it might be harder to get in some other subjects when parents are working and kids are trying to learn from home. So we spent the first month of school training the children how to use Cadenza, and it's going pretty well. I mean, some of the kids who weren't practicing or tracking practice before might not still be doing that now, but more of them are. And I think it's been going really well. I think it's great. I can just log in and see who's practicing. know, before the class where we might be on a certain thing. If I've given them a play along to do, then I see who's working on it and see who might not have done it during the week, and then I might need to spend extra time with them in class. I think those were all the points we were talking about. Was there anything else I should touch on, Jody?
I think that sounds great. I know that you did mention an interesting point to me about digitizing your studio.
Yes.
That may be helpful to some people out there.
So with my private studio, I realized early on with online teaching that students needed to be able to see me point to things in the music. Particularly young students who aren't savvy yet at reading music, and you could say measure number or bar number or line number or page number, and particularly when they're younger, all those sort of terms still get them jumbled a bit. And so I found myself, taking my music and having to hold up the screen and say, this is where we are. And this became a real problem, trying to see what I'm pointing to and them seeing what they're pointing to. It's just a mess. So over the spring, I digitized a lot of my piano books, theory books, so that I could screen share with the students and point with my mouse, and then they could see a lot easier. Often I would keep my screen share up while they were playing with their music so that they could quickly turn and see where I was pointing to if I needed them to start from a particular place. It made it really well. What I really like is when kids take a picture of their theory homework and put it into Cadenza for me so I can see it on my screen. Because then again, kids were trying to hold their finished theory homework up to the camera like, this is what I did. And I'm going, okay, I can't see that. You need to hold it still, hold it up, down, So because they can load it right into Cadenza, it's easier. And if the kids are starting to learn how to use that feature on their own, it also means mom and dad don't have to remember to take a picture of their theory and email it to me before the lesson. And so if I need to explain something that they're having trouble with, I can screen share with them and point right with my cursor, okay, this question here we had a little problem with. And it makes it so much easier to communicate when you're not in the room with each other. Sorry, I missed what was the second thing I was supposed to... Oh, I did try. Yeah. So this also helps in the classroom. A lot of publishers during the pandemic have given permission to teachers to share digitally materials as long as they have bought a physical copy. So for example, if I have 16 kids in my class and we're learning ukulele, I don't have a way necessarily if they're at home learning to use those books if I have them at the school. Or if you conduct a choir and you want the kids to learn a new piece and they're in lockdown, then you can share practice files with them. This is really great with Cadenza because then I can digitize something from the physical book that we have sitting at the school and put it in my Dropbox or put it in my Google Drive and then share the link on Cadenza with the kids, or just take a picture and put it right in the task. And then I don't have to worry about them dragging the books back and forth to home if we're in lockdown, trying to sanitize books. That's a bit of a nightmare, sanitizing books, because paper doesn't sanitize very well. So by digitizing and putting into the task on Cadenza, it means my whole class has access to it right away. The older kids at my school have their own devices at school, so it means they're having that device and they're using it for other subjects. They don't have to also remember to bring the physical book back that they're taking back and forth. Books getting lost. So because the publishers are allowing us to do that, with a limited, not just digitizing and giving to the kids in lieu of buying a paper copy. Obviously you have your hard copy. So during this time, a lot of publishers are letting you do that. I have all the paper copies at school. The kids then can access them through Cadenza, and it's another less step because they can go in, start their practice, and then click the link and see the music, and they're doing it all right there on their device, so less things they have to jigger around with.
That's so great. I love how you've oh, absolutely, yes. And I like how you've come to use it in a time efficient way, because that is when I first present Cadenza, sometimes that's what I'm asked, but my experience is that it has saved me loads of time.
When I first was using it, It was okay, finish the lesson, go in and create the lesson in Cadenza, and it was extra time at first, but I've learned how to be able to have my focus in two different places by trying to put some of it in during their lesson, so I'm not doing it after the lesson. And if you just I don't know if you talked about duplicating a previous lesson.
I did
but
not.
Once you have a lesson in, you don't have to create every lesson from scratch. I often will duplicate the last lesson and then edit and change the tasks accordingly, which saves a ton of time. And then as the students are playing, I can say, okay, well, let's keep that the same as last week, or let's change that now. And then that has saved a lot of time too.
Yes, that's excellent. That's how I use it as well. Yeah. And I'm sure Heather uses that duplication in comparison to the old notebook way of writing every assignment every single week. It starts fresh. It's a huge time saver. And then you spend more time teaching and interacting with the student.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because when we first went to online learning, the kids were taking their own notes, and I've had to make sure, we ended 5 minutes before the lesson finished, because depending how old the kid was, they may have been slow or fast at taking their notes. And so here I am dictating to them online, where I can just put it into Cadenza and it's done while they're playing, while they're practicing, and then I don't have to worry. They can have more time to actually play for me. Oh, I think, Jody, that you're muted.
I know that we had discussed possibly doing some breakout rooms depending on the numbers that came in, but I think we can just do a general Q&A right now to finish the webinar. So if anyone has any questions that either Heather or Tracy or myself can answer, I know we would be happy to. Our lovely Rena has her hand up.
Yeah, I put my hand up and the teacher never looks at me. I have a question for Tracy. I'm curious what ages you said in the classroom you're using it. Is it elementary school, high school, middle school? You said ukulele, so I'm guessing some elementary kids.
Yeah, so with my school, I teach K-8, and I normally don't expect at-home practice until grade 3. At our school, the kids have been asked to have, I should say it's a private school, so some of the things that I may be implementing in terms of kids having devices may not be feasible in a public school, depending on economics and things like that. But the kids were asked this year from grade 5 to 8 to have a device, so that the teachers can teach them how to use Google Classroom. I can teach them how to use Cadenza. Basically, we're trying to lay the groundwork for if there's another lockdown. Now, luckily right now, the numbers are really great in Kingston, so we're good for now, but we really don't want to be in another position where we're in lockdown and the kids don't know how to use the materials we're giving them. So so it's grade 3 to 8 that I'm using Cadenza with. Normally, I think with grade 3 and 4, the parents are very much there and helping them. The grade 5s to 8, I'm trying to make them a little more independent by giving them time in the classroom to actually use Cadenza. So if I give them their own individual practice time, instead of me putting it up on the smartboard, I would say, okay, you can get out your devices, log into Cadenza, start a practice, and that way I can field any issues. Even at that age, there are kids who can't necessarily remember their password or don't type it in correctly, so I can try and help them field that stuff. But once they're in and starting, then they're pretty independent.
So if I may, just one more question, Tracy. You found Cadenza first as a studio teacher, and then you decided to use it in your classroom because you could see that it would work in both settings.
I had heard of Cadenza before the pandemic, and at that time the status quo was working. I had my private studio students had been all with me for a number of years. They were either very self-sufficient at taking their own notes during a lesson, like, a 10 or 11-year-old who'd been with me since 5 years old was very self-sufficient at taking their own notes. Or if they were littles, I would write their notes as they were playing, which is easier to do when you're teaching piano, not as easy when you're teaching voice, because you're usually playing for them, because I do teach voice as well. And then when the pandemic hit, and I thought it was great. Like I said, this is a really great app. Everything is moving smoothly right now. I don't think I'm going to, rock the boat. But when the pandemic hit, I was like, there's got to be, a better way of communicating. I didn't make it mandatory at first. Parents, I think, were very overwhelmed with the amount of apps that, you might get an app from your language arts teacher to go to Epic Books, and then you might get an app from your math teacher to do this. And the list of apps, parents were getting really brain fried and not wanting to learn another app. But as we all know, lockdown was really just crazy. I mean, my life went pretty smoothly. I don't have kids that I'm trying to manage while I'm teaching online, but a lot of my teacher friends who have kids are trying to teach their classes. They're trying to manage their kids' teaching. It was just quite crazy. But over the summer, as everything settled, and I said, okay, every time I get a new student on now, I'm going to try and get them into Cadenza, because we're either face-to-face learning at the school, and I don't want to be touching any more materials than I have to, or they're still online, because I'm only teaching face-to-face with the kids at the school. I still have my rest of my studio online. Either way, in either instance, Cadenza works.
Right. And
that's great.
Yeah, and so this is sort of imagining a world without COVID. But let's do that just for fun.
Yes.
Would you keep using Cadenza if there was no more pandemic? Would you keep using it in the classroom?
Yeah, I think like the kids who are now used to using it, they see the advantage. And I think even like for my youngest students who are like say age 4, 5, and 6, it's obviously the parents who are doing most of the inputting, but even when we went back to face-to-face learning, some of my students are still submitting videos. Like when we were online learning, was getting videos all the time, and I'm still getting them, and the kids love to do it. They're like, okay, let's video for Mrs. Stabak or whatever. And so, yeah, I definitely would. I'm sort of over the handwriting of everybody's material every week, to be honest.
And doing the same thing twice. I'm hogging the time, but I'm just so curious to hear about your experience. So thank you. I know there are other questions. Thanks.
No problem.
I would like to hear, Heather, some of your success stories with your students now that you've been using it over a bit of a length of time to see the progress.
Yeah, I have seen my students are practicing so much more because they know I'm watching their time to see how much time they're practicing. And they also are challenging themselves to see if they can click every task every day on what they're supposed to be working on. So I've seen such great progress in my students practicing. For my older students, what is wonderful about Cadenza too is that it gives them an opportunity, like Tracy was talking about. They're recording themselves and putting it into Cadenza so that I can watch it and give them feedback throughout the week. And so that has helped them to progress at a faster pace too. Overall, I think as far as being successful, it's been very successful for me as a teacher, because then I'm able to remember and track and see the things that I've assigned to a student prior to them coming to their lesson. So it's helping me with my own studio management as well. So those are a few successes for me.
Fantastic. That's great. I think we had another question as well. Sharon was going to mention.
Yes, there was a question from the chat box asking about if there is a French language version of this, as well as has Cadenza been accepted or recommended for CCPALO, which the English version of that would be OSAPAC. I'm not quite sure what the acronym stands for, but that was the follow-up question to whether there's a French language version.
Currently, there is not another language version. It will in the checklist or in the description area, you're entering the information. And we do have a teacher actually in Sherbrooke, Quebec at Cégep who uses this in French with all of her students. So I could reach out to her and ask her and find out how she does that and how she implements French into the program. I know it will ask you to translate when you come onto the page if you're normally using another language, but yeah, sorry, I don't have a yes or no answer, but I know that it's being used successfully by Natalie in Cégep in Sherbrooke. Ontario Software Acquisition Program Advisory Committee. That's a mouthful. No, we're not associated with that in any way. I'm wondering if you could expand the question. I wasn't quite clear on exactly what the question was involving the OSAPAC.
Perhaps Joseph can type out a longer question to the group there. Questions coming in from Joseph. So if you have any follow-up there, Joseph, feel free to type it in the chat, and we'll keep an eye for that.
And as far as getting the information from that teacher in Quebec who's using Cadenza, that would be great. And if there's any follow-up information from them, we'd be happy to share it with our community, our newsletter subscribers, and on social media if that information comes through at a future date. So thank you very much.
Just seeing Joseph's note that the ministry pays for software that gets their attention. That's certainly the case, and we're very new 2 or 3 years, but people like Tracy have inspired us to do more work in classrooms and in schools, and OSAPAC is on our list now, so thank you for that, Joseph.
Yes, thank you very much. That's excellent. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I have one. Well, it's more a comment along the lines of the OSCAP. I had a call today from a consultant in the school district where I live here in Nova Scotia, and she was asking if it was on our, what we call the ALR. Of course, everybody has these acronyms, but it's the Authorized Learning Resource List. And if it's listed on that list, it means it's been vetted by the Ministry of Education, and then it's approved, and then teachers who subscribe to whatever, the software, or if it's a book, or if it's any kind of resource, they get discounted prices because the ministry supplements the cost for school usage. So this may be something we should consider, in promoting it to classrooms, classroom teachers. I think it might be a good idea to present Cadenza to the contact at the ministry who deals with arts education. And she's a good friend of mine, so I could easily get this to happen. And then it would go through a process of a committee that reviews it and makes sure it's cleared for bias and all of those sorts of things. And then once it's on that list, it's more accessible for teachers in Nova Scotia. I can help manage that if you would like.
Excellent. We can maybe have a conversation between now and when we do a follow-up, Eric, and then we'll have more information to share. That's great. I also wanted to point out in the chat that Janet Olson has joined us, and she uses Cadenza for some Spanish-speaking families, and it works really well, she says. So, yeah, so that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Janet. So I guess if there are no other questions, we can wrap it up unless someone would like to see another demo, see something in action, anything. Well, then I'll turn it back over to Sharon and Victoria with a very big thank you very much for hosting this, and Eric for asking. And I just really, really am pleased to hear Heather and Tracy speak on the tool, because I didn't know them previously. They've just come on as really excited users. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jody, and thank you, Heather and Tracy, for joining us and sharing your insights on how you've been implementing Cadenza in your studios and in your classrooms. This was a really fascinating discussion. I'm also a teacher, a private studio teacher, in addition to working with the Coalition for Music Education. So I learned a lot. I'm sure this was very interesting for all of us here. And thank you again so much for joining us. If you have any more questions about Cadenza that didn't get answered tonight, or if you think of something in the future, you can feel free to contact us. You can send an email to info@coalitioncanada.ca. And I know there's a list of FAQs up on the Cadenza website, so you can consult that. Maybe Jody can just share what the name of the website is one more time. I think I've forgotten the entire URL.
Sure, and I'll type it into the chat as well. It's cadenzapracticeapp.com, and practice with a C.
Can I just add in that I'm still constantly learning about the things you can do in Cadenza, and even just watching Jody's presentation, I learned something new that I can share with my students. So it's an evolving thing, and we're all, there's always something new that you can learn about it. So if you feel overwhelmed about all the features, just try one or two at a time. And then get students using more features. The emojis are great, because then they can do a quick little click, and then as they learn how to use it, they can expand what they're doing.
Excellent advice. One piece at a time.
And I'm just going to jump in to say, in addition to all the thank yous, just a reminder that we are recording today, and we'll probably do some trimming and then find a way to make that available. And then also, if anyone is interested in doing a follow-up, there's a possibility to do that in 2 weeks' time. So we will send a follow-up email to all of our wonderful participants, and we'll have another registration form just to make sure that we've got attendance for that evening and that planned evening works. And then we'll be in touch about that, or again, as Sharon said, follow-up questions can go through email as well. So thank you again all so much for coming this evening. Eric, is there anything that you'd like to add as we close out the night?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity of sitting in on this session, and thank you, Victoria and Sharon, for organizing it, and thank you, Jody, for taking us through the examples, and to our guests who shared their stories within their own work experience. So it's been great. If teachers wanted to try this out, they could just go to the Cadenza website, right, and figure out how to get into a sample of the program.
That's correct. And it's a 45-day free trial. So they have 45 days to try it out, try little pieces at a time, see if their students engage, and generally they do.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone. And stay tuned for more of our professional learning and development webinars.